Hey everybody, it's Jorbs here. Jorbs coming at you with another Teamfight Tactics video. I saw I've actually seen several tier lists for combined items in Teamfight Tactics, and if you know anything about my content, that is enough to make me foam at the mouth. I hate tier lists, I hate archetypes, I hate ratings. It especially frustrated me with items though, because in Teamfight Tactics, you do not very often get to choose exactly which items you're going to get. They are random drops from creep waves, or you can get them from the carousel, but it's randomized what's on the carousel, and then unless you're in the first round on the carousel, you may not even be able to get the one that you want. Somebody else may take it first. And so, is my cat asleep behind? Oh, interesting. And so I wanted to make a video where rather than saying like, this is the best item, this is the worst item, I said, if you end up with these items, how do you get the most out of them? What do you do with items to win the game? Let me give you 60 seconds of what I think about Teamfight Tactics played at a high level right now, so you know where I'm coming from. If you completely disagree, maybe you're better than me and have some other ideas, and maybe that will change how things go. But in general, these observations that I'm making about items are not going to be tied to Teamfight Tactics right now. They're going to be tied to it in general. So it's not about this metagame. It's about like generally a BF sword makes 20 attack damage. What do the items do? How can they be strong? In the future, if the game gets rebalanced, these things will probably still be true. They'll just maybe fit on different champions. So right now, I think that Teamfight Tactics is largely about not rerolling early, trying to build a comp that can survive and not take too much damage out of whatever cards you get offered early. So 2-star 1-cost units you can luck into without rerolling. If you can hit Elementalists early, that's just a 1-star 2-cost, 3-cost, and 4-cost unit that can be extremely strong. I think the assassin bonuses are really easy to get because there are a lot of assassins and a lot of them cost sort of in the 1 to 3 range, so you'll get lots of those early. I think that Teamfight Tactics is largely about getting that stuff going and then getting to late game with a strong economy and building the strongest comp for the items that you've been offered in order to win the lobby against the comps that you're seeing other people play. One of the big mechanics in Teamfight Tactics is that you can reroll, right? And rerolling is better the more units you can see that are valuable to you. So if you reroll with 8 1-star units, you're going to get tons of value out of that rerolling. If you reroll with, 5 2-star units and 2 1-star units, it's a lot harder to hit stuff that's useful in that situation. And I think that mechanic is a large part of why I've been having most success with building something scrappy that survives for a while and then rerolling sort of all at once to make a very strong late game composition that beats the lobby. So that's the context that we're going to be looking at items in right now. That's how I'm currently evaluating what items do and what I want. BF swords we're going to start with. I'm using metabomb.net right now to get these readouts on items, but you can get them from all sorts of places, including just from inside the game. When you put the items together, it just says what they do. BF swords give plus 20 attack damage. Attack damage is, in my opinion, not one of the more valuable stats in the game, but it's an okay stat. It's probably better than armor and MR, but worse than the other stuff. Maybe it's better than health. The problem with attack damage is that you gain mana by attacking, but you don't gain more mana by attacking for more damage. And so attack speed will make you deal more damage as well as attack damage, but attack speed will also get you more mana at the same time. And that lets you ultimate faster, which is very good. Another problem with attack damage is that you can multiplicatively stack incredibly large hits in this game. Like I've seen an Akali of mine hit for 4,008 damage, for example. A problem with stacking attack damage, though, is that often you're overkilling by a lot, and that extra damage gets wasted. If you attack a unit with 50 health left, and you deal 4,000 damage to it, 3,950 of that damage didn't do anything. And so Generally, attack speed's a little bit more flexible because it makes you mana faster and because you don't have to worry quite as much about overkilling because you're increasing your damage output per second, but you're doing it by like having 2 attacks per second instead of 1 attack per second, which means that you end up overkilling by half as much. That said, what do we do if we get a BF sword early in the game? I think there are 2 very common, very strong things to do with BF swords in this game. One of them is to build Shojin. Spear of Shojin is what it's called, I believe. That's with BF Sword and the Tear of the Goddess. After casting an ability, regain 15% of remaining maximum mana per attack. So, does my mouse cursor show up here? Yeah, okay, cool. So, Shojin is a very good item for a character who is going to auto attack and cares about the extra auto attack damage, who is going to get to ultimate quickly. The Tear of the Goddess gives plus 20 mana, so that helps to ultimate the first time, and who is hopefully going to ultimate multiple times in a fight, because that's the only way that you get value out of the actual text that Shojin is giving you, the extra mana after you ultimate the first time. So what characters attack and care about ultimating faster the first time and care about ultimating multiple times in a fight? Characters that spring to mind are Ashe, Pike, Akali, Kayle. I don't think that that's all of them by any sense of the imagination, but these are characters who are very, very good with Shojin because every single stat on it works really well with their kit and what they're trying to do. Keep in mind for Pike and Akali, they have incredible percent damage on crits if you have the assassin bonus as well, so that attack damage that you're getting out of this item is going crazy as they're dealing more and more and more damage with crits. A very common thing that I like to do with Shojin is to throw it on Pike early in the game. I don't think I'm the only person who's worked out that you can do that, but I want to expand on that even more. Pike is a really strong champion right now in this game because he is 2 cost, and items which go on late game carries work really well on him. So you throw him into your team. His line crowd control is very good in mid game. When there are 5 or 6 units on the board, the line crowd control is really good. When there are 9 units on the board, it's not as good because units will often be in huge clumps and it will be very difficult to sort of pull them apart and get in between them. But when there are 5 or 6 units, I think it's really good. And then you get rid of Pike and put the Spear of Shojin on somebody like a Brand or the Akali that I mentioned before or the Kayle that I mentioned before. And you get to use these items in multiple stages of the game in different compositions, and I think that's really, really strong. The other thing that I think is very strong to do with BF Sword is to build a Zeke's Herald out of it with the Giant Spell. This gets extra bonus props because you're using a Giant Spell for something that does literally anything, and that's sort of hard to do with the Giant Spell in this game sometimes, unfortunately. Health's an okay stat. Health is definitely an okay stat, but turning health into 10% attack speed for adjacent allies at the beginning of combat's a very big deal. Generally, what I do with Zeke's Herald is I put it together early if I have it available and plan on it making my scrappy team survive through mid-game without too much trouble. And then later in the game, if I'm building a composition that's dependent on one big hyper carry, Zeke's Herald is a way to sort of get a 4th item onto that champion, which can be really nice. If I'm building a comp that's more about a blob of strong units, like Assassins 6 or Sorcerers 6, I would say, are comps that are about blobs of strong units. Zeke's just sort of goes in the middle of them, and you're great. I often choose not to deploy a full 6 units around a Zeke's Herald with Assassins, though, choosing instead to put Zeke's on the first rank, and then you can only get 4 units around it, but that way you don't have any units on the first row, and that can be really good with Assassins to make sure that the opponent is able to move forward toward you and spread out their units so you can get in behind them and stuff. Okay, Other items here, turning Draven into an assassin with Yomus can be very, very, very strong. Draven in particular is, I think, the unit that you do this with. I don't think there's another unit in the game that's going to give you quite the same effect, but Draven is insane as an assassin if you already have a few assassins in your squad. Getting lifesteal, I actually like. I don't think Bloodthirster and Hextech are necessarily that different. So a huge thing about putting lifesteal on a major carry is that it stops the carry from just dying by getting one shot by a tank with Thornmail. Thornmail is an item which can be used to counter like a Draven 2 carry comp with no other units. You just build a tank with 4,000 health and Thornmail and put it on a spot where Draven will attack it first in the fight, and Draven kills himself. So having a Negatron Cloak for the splash damage from magic users and lifesteal to protect you from Thornmail can be pretty important to keep Draven alive. Hextech's worse than Bloodthirster, but sometimes it can be what you want instead. Guardian Eagle I have seen be useful exactly once in all of the time that I've played Teamfight Tactics. This item almost always just results in the unit dying, being dead until the fight is over, and then being surrounded and killed by the opponent's team when it revives. That's more what it usually does. Wouldn't recommend building this item ever. This is sort of the Divine, I think is this item's name. I think this item's actually like pretty okay. The problem is that you're using a recurve bow, and recurve bows can be used for much stronger things. But I think there's an inclination for someone like me, I'll call myself out here, to look at this item and think, oh, it's inconsistent. I need an item that will be more consistent so that I can, win consistently. This game has a ton of variants, and you're just going to have variants all the time. Like, crit chance is 25% on all of your units. So if you're playing an Assassin's comp, whether you get crits or not is going to sometimes decide whether you win or not. That's sort of unavoidable. But another thing is that you deal more damage to opponents by killing them by a larger margin in this game. And so Sword of the Divine can actually have value even if it doesn't change a lost fight into a won fight. It can have value by changing a won fight into a fight that gets won even more, or by changing a lost fight into a lost fight that gets lost by slightly less. And I think that's a big deal. In other games, an item like this, I'd look at it and think, oh, either I'm going to win anyway without it, in which case the ability is useless, or I'm going to be losing and only ever win if this goes off, in which case it's just not something I can rely on. I need to find a more reliable strategy. But in this game, because how much you win or lose by matters, Sword of the Divine proc is pretty much always going to give you some value. And the stats on it are pretty good. But again, it's hard to use a recurve bow for this item, I think, because the other recurve bow items are so good. Let's look at recurve bows. Okay, so generally with swords, I'm like looking at a Zeke's, or I'm looking at a Shojin, was what we learned there, right? That's basically what I said. Cool. Cool, good work. I just said it and took a very long time saying it. Well, hopefully you enjoy hearing me talk. Recurve bows are definitely one of the strongest components, if not the strongest component in the game. The 20% attack speed gives you more damage on damage dealers who deal a lot of damage per hit. It gives you more mana on everybody because attacks give you more mana. And the items that it builds into are sometimes really, really, really broken. So very broken items here include Rapid Fire Cannon. This attacks cannot miss clause is something unique and very valuable. It means that like Yordles don't work. It means that Phantom Dancer doesn't counter assassins anymore. And the double your attack range bonus means that you can have a carry in a corner and the carry will not leave that corner. So you can actually keep a carry boxed in and safe and defended by your other units potentially. Downsides of rapid fire cannon sort of don't exist. This item's just very, very, very strong. You can throw it on melee units and they will start attacking from 2 tiles away, which can be really nice in like in Assassin's 6. This is a very good item if you put it on Zed, for example. Now your assassins all jump at the enemy, right? And a lot of them are melee range, so maybe they can't all get into combat, all get into melee range. But Zed's attacking from 2 tiles away. Also, a lot of the time people put a Phantom Dancer on their carry to try to counter assassins, but Zed's attacks can't miss, so Phantom Dancer doesn't work anymore. It's a very powerful item. Throwing it on like a Nidalee early can be really good. Nidalee does pretty good with the extended range. Nidalee just has really good base stats and makes good use of this. Throwing it on any 2-star, 1-cost shooter character can be pretty good. And then later on in the game, generally you want this to be on somebody who's dealing attack damage, I would say. So one thing that I think can get messy with rapid fire cannon is it is not the best item to put on like Aurelion Sol or Brand or I don't know, Karthus or whoever your late game magic damage dealing carry is going to be. And so if you end up with one of those characters as a late game carry, you may actually not have a great character to put a rapid fire cannon on by the time you get to the end of the game, because you might not actually have like that Draven who's stacking a ton of damage. You might not have Assassin's bonus for Zed or Akali or whatever. I think that this item is very much worse on Brand than it is on Draven. Very much worse on Aurelion Sol than it is on Draven. And I think that's something to keep in mind on it. The attacks cannot miss clause doesn't really do very much anymore if you put this on a mage. And the extra mana that you're getting from the attack speed doesn't matter quite as much when you could have gotten it out of a tier instead. And tier items probably do a better job of getting your ultimates off on those characters than the extra attack range does. Extra attack range and attack speed. So yeah, I'd say Rapid Fire Cannon is very good, but keep in mind that it's way better on an attack damage dealing carry than it is on a magic damage dealing carry. Phantom Dancer, another broken item. I just talked at length about how it gets countered by Rapid Fire Cannon. That doesn't mean that it's bad by any sense of the imagination. You still only have to worry about the situation where your opponent manages to get the Rapid Fire Cannon unit attacking your carry with the Phantom Dancer on it. Putting Phantom Dancer on Shyvana can be very, very strong. When paired with Aurelion Sol, you can build a carry Shyvana because this champion is immune to magic from the dragon bonus and is now dodging all crits from physical damage dealers. So you have a character who can be very, very, very difficult to kill and who you can then perhaps... I mean, actually, that's a character the Rapid Fire Cannon would be okay on, but yeah, you can perhaps put some attack damage items on Shyvana after that happens. So Phantom Dancer is very good. Typically something that I would build later in the game once it became clear that I was in a comp that cared a lot about one particular carry. But also something that I'm happy to build early in the game. It's pretty good on a Kassadin early in the game. Okay on your backline, like 2-star Tristana or something, because assassins may jump on her, and unfortunately sometimes Kha'Zix will kill her anyway because she gets separated from your front line when you only have like 4 units or whatever. But it can still be okay early game in a variety of places, and then late game is where sometimes it will be like, okay, the best item I can possibly get at this point is Phantom Dancer. I'm hoping to get a Chain Vest from the carousel, sort of thing. Other items that build out of recurve bows, I think, are quite a lot worse. We already talked about Sword of the Divine. I'm not going to talk about it again. I think, like, I have heard so many people say that Rageblade is, like, just so good. But it's using a needlessly large rod on a character to make them attack faster, which is backwards. Um, if you're making a character attack really, really fast, you want that character to deal a lot of damage with their attacks. And this is not like that needlessly large rod doesn't really do that particularly well, right? It's giving them more damage on their abilities when their abilities go off instead. And then this like gain 3% stacking attack speed on a hit, which stacks infinitely, that's like cool and all, but the universe in which you get that up above like 30% or something um, doesn't occur that often, really. Like late in the game, you have to worry about your carry getting hit by Sejuani ult or Cho'Gath ult or killed by an assassin or hooked by a Blitzcrank. And also, if you output your damage at the end of a fight instead of the beginning of a fight, which is what this item does, it makes it so you deal more and more damage the longer the fight goes on, right? But that means that like you're letting your opponent's creatures get off their ultimates before you kill them. You're letting your opponent's creatures kill your other units before you kill them. Stuff like that. So generally, I don't think Rageblade is super great. Sometimes you can build it early to like it's actually better with 4 units on the board, I think, than with 9 units on the board. Those fights can go pretty long sometimes. So generally, I would like maybe build this item early if I wanted something early, but I'm not that excited about it later in the game. Um, Static Shiv and Titanic Hydra, 2 items that like deal splash damage basically by attacking. Hydra probably does a better job of it. The idea with Hydra being to put it on like a 3-star 1-cost marksman, and all of a sudden they're dealing a huge amount of splash damage. Especially if you're a Tristana with the Gunslinger bonus who's making more attacks, like attacking lots of different things at the same time. A big problem with this item that you need to keep in mind, well, with either of those items actually, is that taking damage increases the enemy's mana. And so if you have this item on like a 2-cost marksman, and it's just dealing a little bit of splash damage to their backline, you're making them ultimate faster, and that may actually be actively bad for you. Definitely it does enough damage to be worth it a lot of the time, but these are items which actually can have drawbacks, and that's, a thing to keep in mind and be a little bit worried about. I don't know what the chance to shrink on Cursed Blade is. It happens sometimes, and it's like fine when it does. I wish that I knew what the chance to shrink was. I will often build a Cursed Blade late in the game. Obviously, if your opponent's using 1-star units, it's not a very good item, so this is an item that only really does things later on in the game. And, it can be okay, but usually the reason that I build it late in the game is just that the only components I have are Recurvo and Negatron, to be honest. Or, like, I want a unit to attack a bit faster and have a Negatron cloak to survive the enemy's sorcerer comp, in which case, oh, hey, these combine into that. Cool. Whatever. Making a unit of Blade Master can be pretty cool. Blade Masters can attack a hell of a lot of times. If you're going like Gunslingers, Blade Masters have some synergy there, and you can like make your Tristana a Blade Master too or something. I think that those synergies are really hard to put together. I think it's really hard to survive with them because they don't do much unless you sort of all in on them. So going through the middle of the game, it's just very seldom the case that I have units that make sense with those synergies. I'm more likely to have something like Assassins or Elementalists because those do more without needing to, have everything come together all at once. Do Elementalists do more without needing to have everything come together at once? Maybe it's more that it's easier for everything to come together with Elementalists. You don't need any particular items or anything. You just need to hit the right units. My experience with Blade Masters and Gunslingers is that you not only need to get very specific units, which are not necessarily strong at all on their own, but you also want to build different items from any other comp in the game in order to make those units really strong. And that just feels very restrictive. It feels like you are committing to a strategy which is going to be inflexible, where you're going to lose the game unless you hit the right units as you go along, and where you're not necessarily banking up gold to reroll late in the game very well, nor are you giving yourself many options to hit with rerolls. Like, you need to hit some pretty specific stuff, and that makes it harder to win. Yeah, that's my recurve bow stuff. Recurve bow is generally very good. Generally, my default is going to be a recurve bow if I have no item that needs completing at a carousel. If I'm at a carousel and I like really want a particular item, though, I'll go ahead and snag it. All right, so chain vests. We are getting 20 armor out of a chain vest. In League of Legends, for every 100 armor that a character has, it takes twice as much physical damage to kill them. So, 20 armor from a chain vest gives you, what? An increase of 20% health against physical? Probably not exactly, but something like that, vaguely. Something like that. You know, that's pretty nice. I think it's worth noting. I think it's actually really important to note with defensive stats in this game that you gain mana by taking damage, and a lot of the units in the game are sort of balanced around the point where they will get really close to getting their ultimate off before dying if they don't have any items. So like a Cho'Gath level 1 will get pretty close to ulting and then die unless you give him any help at all. And then with any help at all, he's going to get his ultimate off way, way, way more often. And so just putting one chain vest on a unit to get it to ultimate is reasonable. Chain vests don't have that many incredible uses, in my opinion, but they have a lot of pretty good uses. Locket of the Iron Solari is their one ubiquitously good and sometimes incredible use. Chain vest plus needlessly large rod gives you a shield around your hex. It also actually shields the hex that it's in, which is different from the item's description, but whatever. Shields all of these units for 200 health on combat start. So that's 7 tiles, 1400 health at the start of the combat. This actually scales as well. So like if you have sorcerers and you are doing this and you have 3 lockets of the Iron Solari, you're putting over 10,000 health across 7 units. Not each, but total. Total's up to 10,000 health. This item can be super, super strong. And going back again to that thing I said about ultimating, this is a way to make a lot of your units all at once have enough health to get their ultimates off in fights. I think that Locket of the Iron Solari is the strongest item in the game right now. I think it is actually the strongest item in the game without the Sorceress energy. Like, if that got patched out, I would still think it was the strongest item in the game. I think that this and Zeke's Herald are just very, very, very strong items, and this is the stronger of the two. The reason is... okay, a couple of reasons. One, health is very, very strong as a defensive stat in this game. It's very hard to make sure that your guys with armor are only getting attacked by physical damage and your guys with magic resist are only getting attacked by magic damage. Health is indifferent. It works either way. And two, that thing I said earlier about how you need a little bit of help to get your units to ultimate sometimes. And Locket of the Iron Solari helps 7 units at once. So all of a sudden with one item, you're going from that default game state where your units are like fair and they, you know, hit other things with their hammers or whatever, and then sometimes they die and occasionally they get their ultimates off. You're going from that default state to a state where your units are unfair, they have more health than the enemy units, they almost always get their ultimates off in a fight that seems like it should be fair otherwise, and all of a sudden you start winning a hell of a lot more often. I think Locket of the Iron Solari is insane. I will take Chain Vest fairly high on the starting carousel. Like, it's not above Needlessly Large Rod or Recurve Bow, and probably not above BF Sword or Tier, but it's definitely the highest priority item out of all the defensive items for me because of Locket of the Iron Solari. We talked about Phantom Dancer already, that's fine. We talked about Guardian Angel already, which is not good at all. And then these 5 items are all like items which can. Okay, Frozen Heart's like whatever. You put this on your Cho'Gath in the front line, it's okay. You put it on your Pike early on in the game because Pike jumps into the enemy backline and slows down their carries. That's okay too. You can put it on like Zed or Akali or something if you're going with assassins for much the same reason. Yeah, Frozen Heart's okay. I'm usually looking to use these pieces to build a better item, but if it's the best thing I have and I want something now, I'll go ahead and build it for sure. Um, the remaining 4 items are like sometimes insane, and most of the time they don't do anything, in my opinion. So Thornmail can be an insane late game item if you can get it on something that the enemy's Draven is attacking and the enemy's Draven doesn't have lifesteal. Otherwise, I basically wouldn't build it. The damage that it reflects actually scales with ability power, so that's a thing. If you have a giant Garen with a like Morella Nomicon and I don't have something else, Thornmail can be pretty sweet, but generally this item's not the most ridiculous thing ever in my experience. It's okay. It's okay. I don't think chain vests give enough armor for it to be really incredible, but it's okay. I don't actually know what this item's called, but attacks have a chance to disarm. This is an item which is insane on gunslingers. This is an example of an item where, like, when you go gunslingers, you build different items from the items that other people build. And so you sort of have to commit to gunslingers and you're stuck in them, and it's difficult to use the items that you've built for valuable stuff on other units. Because attacks have a chance to disarm. You're not going to put that on your Akali and Assassin's 6 comp. Like, get out of here, that's adorable, but it's very, very dumb. Your Akali already disarms enemies by critting them for 4,000 damage. She doesn't need to also disarm them with this item. So yeah, you can put this on a Tristana, and if your Tristana is attacking everything on the board, it's a really strong item. And otherwise, I wouldn't bother building it, basically, unless I had nothing else to do with my components late in the game. Um, it's really hard to be auto-attacking the enemy's carry, because the enemy puts their carry somewhere that's very protected, generally. And if you are in a situation where you can line a unit up to attack somebody on the enemy's front line and it matters, like maybe you're going to attack the enemy's Swain to stop it from ulting or something on the enemy's front line, I think going for 2 demons for the demon buff, which has a chance of burning the enemy's mana, generally makes a lot more sense than trying to build this item and have that do the thing. Um, there are a lot of good demons. It's pretty easy to get 2 demons and have them fit into like just about any comp. Swain is a demon, Morgana is a demon, Varus is a demon. And the mana burn ability on demons procs probably. I don't know what the chance of this actually going off is, but it probably procs about as often as this does. And not only does it stop them from ultimating because it removes all their mana, but it also deals them true damage for how much mana it removes. So generally, if I'm not in gunslingers, I'm not going to build this, and if I want this effect, I go for demons to get that effect. Red buff, attacks burn for 2.5% max health. Burned units cannot heal. That's like fine. You put it on a gunslinger and it's fine. It's fine on. It's honestly like fine on a lot of things, but it doesn't deal as much damage as like a Bloodthirster or whatever on your marksman carry, and it doesn't deal as much damage as a Morellonomicon on your caster carry. And so you're left in a situation where the only reason that you really care about it is if you have no way to build those items, like all you have is a chain vest and a giant's belt. Although I'll point out that Morellonomicon requires a giant's belt, so You could just wait to get a needlessly large rod from Relinomicon, maybe, and put it on a brand, and all of a sudden make everybody on the enemy's team be burning and not being able to heal. Or you want to go Gunslingers, because Gunslingers, this actually is the better item, better than a Morellonomicon in that case. And with a spatula, a chain vest can make you into a knight. Knight 6 is actually really powerful. It's really powerful against like rangers and nothing else. Maybe against nobles. I don't know. Rangers and nobles don't seem like they show up in the top 3 all that often for me in the games that I'm playing at this point. So going for knights doesn't seem like it does all that much. A lot of the time my comps are dying to giant crits from assassins or giant spells from sorcerers, and getting 80 damage reduced from every auto just doesn't do very much. But it's worth keeping in mind that you can make something into a knight, and if rangers become a huge thing, that could be a thing that you care about a lot more. Alright, Megatron cloaks. We okay? Nope. We okay? Yes. Okay. Negatron cloaks. I actually think the most important thing that a Negatron cloak does is give you 20 magic resist. For all of these items, the thing that the item does other than giving you magic resist is not that important. So against a sorcerer comp, they're going to ultimate and they're going to try to kill your guy, right? And if your guy survives with 200 HP instead of dying, your guy's not getting attacked again until another ultimate goes off. And if it's like an Aurelian Soul ultimate, that Aurelian Soul ultimate is going to have to attack your guy instead of the rest of your team another time. And so having somebody survive by a little bit of health against sorcerers can be a really big deal. And 20 magic resist is often all you need to do that. So Negatron cloaks are often going on my pieces just because I want them to survive like a Karth Assault or something. And the rest of the stuff that I'm doing with the item doesn't necessarily matter that much. I will say Dragon's Claw for 83% resistance to magic damage can be incredibly strong. This isn't 83 magic resist, this is 83% resistance to magic damage, so, you know, that's a lot. If you want a unit that's not going to be dying to sorcerers, this is a way to do that. Another way to do this is to get Aurelian Soul and Shyvana, which gives you 2 units which are immune to magic damage. And I want to point out that you can put those units into lots and lots and lots of different comps, and you can even have them sit on your bench and then switch into them if in the late game it becomes clear that you're fighting against magic dealers. So if I'm in a top 3 which has 2 other assassins, or 2 assassin comps in it, I'm not going to go Aurelian Soul Shyvana, no way. But if I get to the top 3 and a couple of sorcerer players knock out 2 assassins, and then it's me against 2 sorcerers in the top 3, I'm going to be really happy to have an Aurelian Soul and a Shyvana available to me to swap into. And generally being aware of how your comp can swap what units are in it to go from winning, or to go from losing against an enemy to winning against an enemy in the late game is just something that you will slowly build up understanding of as you experiment more and more and more with lots of different late game situations. But Dragon's Claw is an okay way to do that as well, which doesn't require Aurelian Soul and Shyvana, and doesn't require you to be in a situation where it's easy to swap into them and give them items, because you're going to have to give them items too. It's not a situation where you get to just put them in with no items and win all of a sudden because they'll just die to auto attack damage. You probably want a 2-star Shyvana and Aurelian Soul and the ability to kit them out. Probably you want to be defending Aurelian Soul, because probably at that point in the game Shyvana is just going to get CC'd to death with Sejuanis and Cho'Gaths. So yeah, that's a cool thing. We already talked about Bloodthirster and how that's good on like Draven and stuff. It doesn't really do much on other things. Ionic Spark, dealing 200 damage to enemies whenever they cast a spell. That actually adds up to be a decent amount of damage. Um, Often one of my mages needs a little bit of magic resist to survive spells, and so mages also want ability power for their ultimates, and sometimes this combine is pretty good. It'll deal a lot of damage to an enemy Pike. It'll deal a lot of damage to an enemy Lulu. We already talked about Curse Blade. High chance to silence on hit. Attacks have a chance to disarm. These are, I think, more of the same sort of thing, where this is very strong in gunslingers and not doing very much on anybody else. And also, you can sort of get it out of demons if you want it in a comp. So, yeah. Zephyr is really strong. On combat start, banish an enemy for 5 seconds. Maybe I shouldn't say really strong, but it's just like a consistently strong item, and it's fun to use. It gives your unit a lot of tanky stats, and you can choose which tile it's hitting on the opponent's board. Actually, as you move a unit around with Zephyr, you'll see a little whirlwind on your board, which shows you which tile it's going to hit. It like mirrors the position of the unit. Getting rid of the enemy's carry for the first 5 seconds of a fight can definitely be the difference between winning and losing. Also, getting rid of an enemy who's going to have a really nasty ult, like a Cho'Gath 2 or something, for the first 5 seconds can make sure that you get all of your stuff off before the enemy gets their stuff off. So Zephyr's good. I won't generally deliberately build a Zephyr. I want the Giant's Belt for Zeke's or Morello's quite often, is I think the main reason. I don't really mind using the Negatron on a Zephyr, but if I do get a Zephyr, I'm generally happy to have it. And then Runon's Hurricane. The problem with Hurricane is that it doesn't like properly do on hit stuff, and attacking extra targets gives them more mana. It's the same problem that we had with Titanic Hydra when I was talking about Titanic Hydra, where you're making enemies' ultimates go off faster. Runon's does crit sometimes and will work with Infinity Edge, so you can use it to do that stuff. I wonder what happens if you go like Rapid Fire Cannon, Runon's Hurricane, and Infinity Edge, Zed. I've never done that before. It might be really strong. I'm not sure. Anyway, Runon's Hurricane is an item that doesn't get built super often because it comes out of a ladle, and ladle just does better things than that. And if you ever have a ladle and a Negatron cloak and need to deal more damage, like yeah, you'll build a Runon's Hurricane, I guess. But it's not a particularly impressive item when you do that, and you're gonna notice when you do it that like there are other damage dealing items that would have been way better than this one. Sometimes you just don't get to choose which one you're building though, right? Needlessly large rods. We talked about Gunblade and how it's like generally just not as good as Bloodthirster on a Draven. We didn't really talk about how good Gunblade is on a Sorcerer. The only time I've had a Sorcerer that was really excited about a Gunblade was an Aurelian Soul, who was just going off super hard and was actually getting some benefit out of the healing. This Aurelian Soul had like a bunch of attack speed and played a little bit more like a Draven than like a Sorcerer in sort of a weird way. I don't think Gunblade's an incredible item though. It can be okay on like Akali as well. Akali deals mixed damage. Her ultimate is a ton of magical damage, and her auto attacks are a ton of physical damage. So the fact that Gunblade heals physical and magical damage does matter quite a bit there. My experience with Assassins, though, is that if they start to take quite a lot of damage, they probably die really fast. And also, if they get CC'd, they die really fast. And Gunblade doesn't help with either of those problems. So my typical inclination with assassins is to try to make lots of different assassins deal a lot of damage to make sure that like no matter who just blows up at the start of the fight by getting targeted by the enemy Draven, we still have somebody alive who's going to hit really hard. So I'm not a huge fan of Gunblade. Rageblade we already talked about. Death Cap. Rabadon's Death Cap gives plus 50% ability power. This is something that you put on a super strong spellcaster carry to, go absolutely insane. The Sorcerer's 6 buff is 100% spell damage for your entire team. So I think that a lot of the time, if you get really strong sorcerer stuff and you build a death cap, you start to overkill and you're not actually getting that much value out of it. My tendency has been more to use my needlessly large rods for Lockets of the Iron Solari, Morellonomicons, and occasionally the Ladle buff. I'm not sure what this is called, but turning an extra unit into a sorcerer can be pretty strong as well. So yeah, I think we talked about Locket of the Iron Solari a lot already. We talked about zapping enemies already. Luden's unfortunately is bugged right now. The value of it only deals 20 splash damage instead of the 200 splash damage it's meant to deal. 200 splash damage seems like a huge amount for what it's worth. So I'm interested to see if that's the number that they actually end up on, because like imagining a brand dealing 200 splash damage, I'm assuming that happens every time the spell bounces. That's like a lot of damage. Anyway, Luden seems like it would be really strong on somebody like Brand. Pike, yeah, probably on Pike too. If it ends up getting to a point where it's dealing 200 splash damage. And then Morellonomicon, I think I've mentioned a lot. Have I actually talked at length about it? I think so, right? No, I haven't that much. Morellonomicon's a very strong item. Anytime that you have a character whose ability hits a lot of the enemy team. And a really fun thing about Morellonomicon is that there's sort of at least one character who does that at every cost in the entire game. And you can sort of like jump your Morellonomicon, like upgrade the character who's carrying it over and over again over the course of a game. So you can start it on a 2-star Garen, like if you get an early 2-star Garen and throw a Morellonomicon on him. In a 3 or 4 unit fight, Garen's really great. Garen can often be in a situation where he's ultimating every unit on the enemy team, or at least half or more of them. Once you get up to 2 costs, Pike is very good with Morellonomicon. Pike is a character who can be hitting 50% or more of the enemy's team in a fight with 5 or 6 units, and who you can get the ability, you can get the ultimate off on multiple times in a fight because it doesn't cost super large amounts of mana to use. You're happy to build a Spear of Shojin on Pike as well, so that can get Pike ultimating multiple times. Generally, I'll just leave this item on Pike at 3 cost, but you can put it on Kennen if you want. Kennen's just not that strong. Usually I'd rather have a Pike with no synergies in my team, even if there was a Kennen there, than sell the Pike and put it on Kennen. It's just like, I don't know, Kennen takes a while to get the ultimate off, and the ultimate doesn't actually hit that much stuff because Kennen is a ranged auto attacker. So Kennen has this like radius around where the ultimate's hitting, but often there are only actually like 1 or 2 units in that radius because Kennen's like standing 2 tiles away from the enemy units auto attacking them. So yeah, generally I just leave it on Pike, I guess, at 3 cost. Maybe at 3 cost there isn't a great person to hold it. But at 4 cost, Brand is incredible with this item. At 5 cost, Karthus or Swain are incredible with this item. So it's an item that you can build early in the game, and then as long as you always have somebody who carries it well, the thing that it does is very, very powerful, dealing true damage to enemies and preventing healing from bloodthirsters and stuff like that is a really big deal. preventing the enemy marksman from healing is actually really important for spellcaster comps, because usually the marksman will be strong enough that it doesn't just die to one spell, and then between spells it will heal back up. So having something like Morella Domicon or something like AoE CC that will hit the enemy carry can be a really big deal. And then you are a sorcerer, Brand. The sorcerer buff gives extra damage on abilities, and yeah, getting that onto a team is super strong. Elementalists and sorcerers both have this thing where they gain twice as much mana from auto attacks, and so it sounds like making Brand, who is an elementalist, into a sorcerer as well would be really strong, because now he's gaining like 4 times mana from auto attacks. However, my understanding is that this is still true. There's the code isn't supporting it yet, so Brand just only gains twice as much mana from attacks, even if he's also a sorcerer and an elementalist. Like, it doesn't give the buff twice or whatever. So, yeah, maybe that will be better once it gets changed. I think they've said that they want to change it to giving 3 times the mana from each attack, but I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen with it. Right now, making another sorcerer is great to make it so that you get the sorcerer buff for your entire team, and otherwise it's not that exciting. Tear of the Goddess is excellent. The idea of Tear of the Goddess is that you ultimate faster. Ultimating faster is really, really good because it lets you ultimate before the other team does, and because ultimates are powerful abilities. So we talked about Spear already, we talked about Ludens and Static Shiv, we've talked about Frozen Heart and Hush and Guardian Angel. So I've actually talked about almost all of these already. The general thing that Tear does is it goes on a unit that you want to ultimate and makes the unit ultimate faster, and that's a very powerful thing to do. You do not need this to only go on your carries. It can go on like a level 1 Cho'Gath in your front line, or a level 2 Cho'Gath would be better probably. Archangels is incredible because it doesn't just make you ultimate a little bit faster, it makes you ultimate a lot faster, and on top of that it makes you ultimate the second time faster. I think there are a lot of spellcasters where this is a much better item than Spear of Shojin. Like a much better item than Spear of Shojin. I think that Spear of Shojin is the item that people get really excited by right now. It seems like lots of people are very excited about Spear of Shojin, but I think Archangels on like your Brand or your Karthus or something is actually the much better thing. And then making units into a demon is actually really quite strong. Demons mana burn enemies that they're auto-attacking. So if you have like Gunslinger Tristana or whatever, and you have all these like silence on hit items you can build, or disarm on hit or whatever, like just making Tristana a demon is a really, really, really powerful thing to do. Throw in a Morgana or a Brand, Swain or something like that. Is Brand a demon? Brand can't be a demon. Is Brand a demon? Man, Brand is strong. Yeah, that's my general stuff I have to say about Tier. As we get further through here, we've seen a lot of the combined items before, so there's a little bit less to say. But hopefully you're getting an overall sense for what these items are doing and what I'm hoping to use them for and stuff like that. And then you can say like, okay, so if I have 5 tiers, what I have are items that make it so that I'm very good at getting my ultimates off, and the sort of team that I want to build would be a team centered around a very powerful spellcaster like a Brand, or a team centered around a number of units who have very powerful ultimates, and the tiers will let them get their ultimates off, like Cho'Gaths and Sejuanis and Nars. That would generally be the thought pattern that I would be using to look at my items and think like, okay, what sort of late game composition am I going to build out of these? Giant Spell, I think we've talked about every item here except for Frozen Mallet and Warmogs. So I've already talked about all of these. Generally, Giant's Belt can go on just about anybody. It does a great job of keeping your carries alive against spells, although it does take up an item slot. If you want to have a 3-item carry late in the game, you're going to be stuck with the Giant's Belt forever, unfortunately, and there's nothing great to build it into unless you want a Morellonomicon, basically. So yeah, it can go on anybody for the same reasons that Locket of the Iron Solari is a good thing, and Tear of the Goddess is a good thing because it helps you ultimate, but it's not the best way to do that. It's just one of the things it can do. Warmogs regenerating 3% of health per second is cute, but not generally all that incredible. Warmogs is like if you really, really want something to ultimate. If you have a level 1 Swain late in the game, putting a Warmogs on your Swain can be pretty okay. There's a combo between Warmogs and Titanic Hydra, where you're getting a bunch of extra health and all of a sudden Titanic Hydra is dealing an extra 60 damage on splash. I've never played a game of Teamfight Tactics in my life where that has been a thing that's been worth building. I think the other ways that items combine just does do more, but I guess it exists. I don't know. Warmogs is an okay item which I'll build sometimes just because I haven't found a good way to use my Giant's Belts, is basically what happens. But for the most part, if I get lots of Giant's Belts, I'm trying to build Zeeks, and I'm trying to build one Morellonomicon to go on somebody on my team. And I'm generally okay with a Zephyr too. Making a unit Glacial... Oh, making a unit Glacial seems like it could be so great, but it just like feels like it isn't. I don't know what it is. I don't know if like the way that freezing units in this game works resets their auto so they attack the instant that they unfreeze or something like that is sort of how it feels. It just feels like freezing enemy units does not do very much. And maybe all it is that you spent 2 component items to make somebody who doesn't deal any more damage than they did before. Often with like glacial heavy comps, which I do not see doing very well in my games. Like I don't often see a comp that's based around a lot of glacial in the top 3. Often it just feels like it would have been easier to CC enemy units with a Cho'Gath or a Sejuani, and if you did that, you get a front line too. And it feels like you have like built a backline with like Ashe and like Lysandra or something, and they just don't actually deal very much damage. Varus deals so much more damage than Ashe does. Ashe's ultimate is cool, sure, but it just feels like the units are heavily hampered by not dealing enough damage. Maybe if you have like 4 rangers, making another one of them glacial, so you have Ashe and a different ranger being glacial is strong. I don't know. I feel like there should be some application for this glacial buff, but I haven't found it yet. So, and it's not just that I haven't found it yet. I haven't seen anybody else in any of my games at like a fairly high MMR using it for any good effect either. So maybe it's just not very good. Yeah. Okay, cool. Spatulas. Spatulas are pretty interesting. They do very unique things. You can build a Force of Nature to increase your unit cap for 2 spatulas. Increasing your unit cap is... It's better if you have a high econ game. So if you have a game where you don't have to reroll early at all, increasing your unit cap lets you make even more ridiculous late game comps. And if you have the knowledge of how to put units together to get really strong abilities, if you understand how to like go Elementalist Assassin Ninja or something like that, or get 4 Imperials and combine those with whatever, having the flexibility to have 1 more unit in there can actually do some pretty sweet stuff. However, the value of Force of Nature is the value of your least good unit. Basically, the best unit that isn't making the team is the value of your Force of Nature. And fairly often, the worst unit on your team is already pretty bad, and the unit 1 worse than that available to you is like even worse. And so sometimes, instead of going for Force of Nature, it is quite a lot better to do something like make your brand a sorcerer, or why would you make brand a sorcerer? You probably want to make somebody who doesn't get double mana from auto attacks a sorcerer instead. Make your Ash a sorcerer? Whatever. Make your Varus a sorcerer. Ooh. Yeah, make somebody a sorcerer who wants to ultimate faster, or make somebody a demon for the mana burn procs, or make somebody an assassin, probably a Draven. Keep in mind that Draven's going to jump into the enemy team when he's an assassin, which is really funny, but also if you are not generally already having a lot of other units jump into the enemy team, he's just going to die. So if you're making Draven an assassin, make sure that he has attack range to attack things without jumping at the start of fights, or else he will jump, is my understanding of how assassins work. I may be misremembering that right now in the moment. It might be that he has to be in base contact with other units. It's either that he has to be in base combat, or he has to be in range of them, and then he won't jump. The other things you can do with Spatula, I haven't worked out great ways to use. Night bonus, Glacial bonus, Hurricane. Just haven't been super great for me ever. And I've never gotten the Blade Master comp to work myself, although I've seen it work to good effect a couple of times with other people piloting it. I think it is something that you can end up with if you get everything sort of pointing toward it over the course of a run. And that's actually it. That's all the items. So I hope you enjoyed hearing me talk about these for an hour. I hope this has given you some insight into how I'm thinking about using these items. In particular, stuff like how I'm thinking about using Morellonomicon, where it transitions from champion to champion over the course of a game of Teamfight Tactics. I think that sort of thinking, where you have a plan not just for right now, but also for later, can be really strong. Because I see some people make mistakes where they combine all of their items really early, and then they have items that are good right now, but end up in a team comp where the items aren't very useful, and they don't win because of that. And then I see other people who don't use their items at all early on, like they're waiting to see what will be the perfect items, but the problem there is that they take way more damage and have to roll earlier and end up not getting as strong a late game team because they've not been getting the power out of their items for so long. And so finding ways to build items which are useful in the early game and which you can be fairly confident you can find good uses for in the late game, I think is a really good thing to practice. And yeah, Morellonomicon, I think, was an example of that. Locker of the Iron Solari, I think, is a great example of that. Zeke's is a great example of that. And then Shojin was another one where I gave an example of, like, you can start it on Pike and then it can go to lots of other people. There are quite a few items like that which can jump from character to character over the course of a game and can fit into lots of different team comps in lots of different ways. Yeah, hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you around. Bye-bye.